this simultaneous awarding of Olympic Games to two cities, LA, Paris 24 and LA 28, created a lot of flexibility for the cities, as well as the potential for the cities to working together to deliver their Olympic Games. Not dissimilar to the initiative taken by PyeongChang to work together with Tokyo 2020 as well as Beijing 2022. The success of future direction on legacy is also related to the implementation of IOC's sustainable strategy that was approved in December 2016. Following a wide stakeholder engagement process, the starting point of sustainable strategy of Olympic Agenda 2020, IOC's strategic roadmap. Together with the other two themes of credibility and youth, sustainability becomes one of the three pillars of Agenda 2020, which calls for inclusion of sustainability in all aspects of Olympic Games and require sustainability to be included in the Olympic movement and the IOC's daily operations. I would like to take this opportunity to emphasize that the scope of sustainability extends beyond only the environment. It will encompass the environment, social, and economic aspects, which are all very important to society and to the movement. For the IOC, sustainability signifies that when we make decisions, we need to ensure feasibility, maximize positive impact, reduce or minimize negative impacts in the social, economic, and environmental areas. This sustainability strategy is based on IOC's three spheres of responsibility. Firstly, IOC as an organization itself, the IOC as the owner of the Olympic Games, and thirdly, IOC as the leader of the Olympic movement. IOC has various degrees of control over these three areas that range from total control in our own operation, in Lausanne, HQ, in Madrid, where our Olympic broadcasting and our Olympic channels operations are based, to a more supporting role with the Olympic movement in general. The level of impact changes as well. From a relatively limited impact, we consider only IOC's local operation in Lausanne and in Madrid, to a potentially global impact through the staging of Olympic Games. The NOCs, 205 of them in 5 continents, as well as a multitude of events staged every year by our Olympic International Sports Federation, as well as national federations. The extensive stakeholder engagement process enables us to identify 5 focus areas which reflect different aspects of our activities that have the most significant interaction with sustainability. Firstly, infrastructure development as well as the use of natural sites. Secondly, source and resourcing in management, mobility, workforce, and climate. All 5 focus areas are material to our movement and important for society as a whole. With our vision to build a better world through sport, we believe that the Olympic movement has both an opportunity and a duty to contribute actively to global sustainability and social development. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ng, for sharing the overall concept of Olympic legacy and sustainability, especially from the IOC's perspective. Now, our following 5 presentations will shed light on plans, legacy plans, and also the execution of those plans from former and future Olympic host cities. Our first presentation will be delivered by the former Vice Minister of Culture, Sports, and Tourism of Korea, Dr. Oh Ji-chul, and he will present under the topic of legacies from the '88 Seoul Olympic Games. Please give a warm welcome now to Dr. Oh.
잘 방향이 okay. Good afternoon, distinguished guests and speakers, and ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to Professor Kang Jun-ho for giving me this wonderful opportunity. It is my great pleasure to be here with the distinguished guests and speakers from IOC and Vancouver and London, Tokyo, and PyeongChang today. I should tell you this because I'm very much filled with emotions as I'm going to present you with the Seoul Olympic Games legacy, because it reminds me of very good old memories. I was personally deeply involved with the Seoul Olympic Games bidding campaign and supporting the governmental support for the organizing committee since 1980. In 1945, when the Second World War ended, Korea was one of the newly independent countries. The world did not know well enough about Korea and Koreans. That's why to Korea and to Koreans, the Olympic Games have not been just the mega sports events, but the best opportunity to make the world know better about Korea and its people, and furthermore enhance the national prestige. In 1948, Korea participated in the St. Moritz Winter Olympics and London Olympics, even before the setup of the Korean government in 1948. And furthermore, during the Korean War, which lasted for 3 years and destroyed 90% of Korean industrial facilities and claimed millions of Korean people, we took part in the 1952 Helsinki Olympic Games, thanks to the people's financial donation. Korea had won the first gold medal in 1976. The Montreal Olympics, the people longed for in wrestling, and successfully held the 42nd World Shooting Championships in 1978 and the 8th World Women's Basketball Championships in 1979. Following the success of 2 World Championships in Seoul, Korea announced its bidding plan for the 24th Summer Olympiad. As you know, the 1976 Montreal Olympics left the cities with a $1.6 billion debt. As a result, only 2 cities, Nagoya and Seoul, placed the bids for the Games. Nagoya's easy victory was widely anticipated. But surprisingly, Seoul won over Nagoya to get the privilege of hosting the 1980 Summer Olympic Games at Baden-Baden in 1981. The voting result, as you saw the photo, 52 versus 27, landslide victory at that time. Japan, through the 1964 Tokyo Olympics, successfully returned to global stage as a socioeconomically a confident nation after the Second World War. Korea aspired to follow up in Japanese footsteps by successfully hosting the 1988 Olympic Games. In that context, Korea poured all her energy and resources into extensive preparation for the Games. So Olympic Games legacies, which I'm going to present to you today, is nothing but the fruits the Games produced. Legacies of the Olympic Games can be roughly categorized into two areas, sports and non-sports fields. Let me begin with the field of sports. First of all, Korea's athletic competitiveness, international competitiveness, has been rapidly and substantially improved. Before 1988, Korea's medal sports was mostly focused on martial arts, such as boxing, wrestling, judo, etc. But after 1988, medal sports have been varied sports, diversified to varied sports, such as athletic, gymnastic, swimming, and fencing, badminton, hockey, handball, etc. Winning medals rose sharply. As I told you, 1948 until 1976, Korea won only one gold medal in 76 Montreal Olympics in wrestling events. In Seoul Olympic Games, Korea won 12 gold medals, ranked fourth in total medal standing. After 1988, driving at such successful result, 1992 to 2016, and the Korean Olympians were able to get more than 10 gold medals for every Olympics. Number two, sports for all movement sprang up and took root into Korea after the Olympic Games. Number three, the Seoul Olympic Games left Seoul and Busan, Yacht City, with the cutting-edge sports facilities. As you can see, photo below left, the Jamsil area, the Seoul Olympic Games main site. Before Olympics, that area used to be an empty, wild plain. But after the Olympic Games, in the preparation for the Games, that area has turned into a wonderful sports park for the Games. We have an old saying in Korea to describe the sea change, Mulberry Field turned into sea. The Olympic Park at Jamsil area has been a perfect example for that Korea old saying. Now, the Olympic Park is the best places where over 10 million people, Seoul citizens, enjoy sports, leisure, and cultural activities. The photo shows Yacht Harbor in Busan, the second biggest city in Korea, which is famous for its best water quality and breathtaking view, and also played a role as a mecca for yacht events in Asia. Number four, we are able to continue to invite world sports events to Korea by enhancement of capability to plan and operate international big events. 2002 FIFA World Cup, co-host with Japan, IF World Athletic Championships in 2011, and PyeongChang Winter Olympics next year, and 2019 FINA World Swimming Championships. Number five, we have Sports Promotion Fund to financially support national athletes and national sports federations as well. So Olympic surplus amounting to 310 million US dollars, and played a very significant role for raising the special fund. Number 6, we were able to have the highest level doping test facilities and technology. Doping Control Center of Korean Institute of Science Technology accumulated skills and expertise and experiences in the Seoul Olympic Games. The center continued to increase the reputation through 2002 FIFA World Cup and IMF World Athletic Championships and 2 times Asian Games. Now, I'm going to move to second part of the Seoul Olympic Games. Number 1, politics. Seoul Olympic Games greatly contribute to the political democratization of Korea, which ended de facto 26-year-long military rule. If you don't mind, I will explain to you the background knowledge a little bit. Korea was a focus of international attention since the successful bidding for the Seoul Olympics. Street demonstration demanding democracy was aggravated in 1987. Military government worried about the damage of international image, and furthermore, IOC's possible demand for moving Olympic site to another country. Eventually, the government embraced the people's demand. That's a prelude to regime change. For decades, we had indirect presidential election system by people's delegates in indoor gymnasium, as you guessed from the photo. We sarcastically called it gymnasium election. But in 1987, 1 year before the Olympic Games, by constitutional amendment, we could have direct presidential election system by people. By photos below, you can see the growing hit of presidential election campaign by 3 candidates. One of the Democratic activists was newly elected as the President of the Republic. And the Seoul Olympic Games expedited democratized governmental administration. Before 1988, governmental administration was very authoritative and focused on effectiveness, as you can imagine in the left photo. But after 1988, the governmental administration became more democratic and put emphasis on democratic procedure, procedural democracy. It goes without saying that the freedom of expression, freedom of press, and human rights have greatly been extended. Number 2, the field of economy. Seoul Olympics contributed greatly to the improvement of urban infrastructure. The symbol of urban infrastructure improvement were construction of 88 Olympic Road, as you can see the photo, and I'm sorry. And the Han River development and expansion of Han River development and Han River development and the subway lines expansion. I will explain to you one by one. Oh, sorry. Okay. The 88 Olympic Road has been an arterial road connecting Gimpo International Airport, then only 1 international airport. Now we have 2 international airports, and the Jamsil area Olympic main site. Yes. Photos show the before and after the Han River development. Sorry. Yes. Before the Olympics, the Han River side used to be a fishing and swimming spot, and the washing, the laundry, by usually women. Now, Han River citizens, the park, we called it Han River Citizens Park, and one of the living legacies of Seoul Olympic Games has 12 places where 10 million Seoulites enjoy sports for all and leisure and activities and use as rest area. You are watching the Han River of today. And thanks to the Seoul Olympic Games, the subway, which is the most convenient transportation means, reaches to all corners of metropolitan area like cobweb. In preparation for the games, the Korea's telecommunication and informational technology had been modernized. We used to call it telecommunication revolution. Korea achieved computerization of governmental administration and civil service system at the end of 1990s. And eventually, we were able to advance to one of the world IT powers and one of the most connected countries. Export continued to increase. Trade scale amounts to $1 trillion this year. Korea eventually became a member nation of OECD in 1996. Such big business groups as Samsung and Hyundai rose to global success. Number 3, the field of diplomacy. Diplomatic achievements were marvelous. Participation of the socialist bloc triggered the establishment of Korea's diplomatic relations with China, the USSR, and East European countries. Korea and those countries simultaneously started negotiations and resulted in the establishment of diplomatic relations. Right after the bidding success, we started to conclude sports exchange and cooperation agreement with East European countries from 1983 to 1987. I was deeply involved with the special project. Number 4, the field of society. Korea's society opened up, and the Korean government freed up people's overseas travel starting from 1989. The games set off people's global thinking. We were able to get out of a frog in the well thinking. And volunteers' contributions to the games invigorated NGOs' activities. With volunteer participation in the games as a turning point, Korean people's voluntary activities spread like wildfire home and abroad. Particularly, donation culture took root in Korea, with Seoul Olympics as a momentum. Korean residents in Japan donated $30 million to the organizing committee, and Korean big companies donated $9 million to create Olympic Sculpture Park. The photos show the people's the gold jewelry donation campaign during the Korea's financial crisis in 1997. That especially moving campaign was set off voluntary donation for the Seoul Olympic Games, I believe. I will explain to you a background a little bit. In 1997, the Asian financial crisis had hit Korea too. Korea was determined to find a way out. Firstly, it obtained a massive $58 billion loan from the International Monetary Fund. We called it IMF crisis. Koreans donated 227 tons of their personally kept gold jewelry, valued at $3 billion, such as heirlooms and traditional presents on the wedding rings, and athletes medals and trophies, gold luck keys, something like that, to help the country pay off the IMF debt ahead of schedule. And the 1980 Olympic Games ignited the welfare policy for the disabled in Korea. The public awareness of the disabled significantly improved. Number 5, the field of culture. Korean people became awakened to the importance of culture and value of the traditional culture. Seoul Olympic Culture and Arts Festival was held in Seoul for 50 days since August 17, 1981, 1 month prior to the opening of the Games, with participation of 46 performing groups from 73 countries. Korea culture's expansion abroad has been in full swing since the Seoul Olympic Games. And we believe it was the beginning of Hallyu, Korean cultural wave. The sculpture park in the Olympic Park, widely beloved open-air museum, has 200 artworks made by world-renowned sculptors. And many Koreans, including the Seoulites, enjoy this sculpture park every weekend. Distinguished guests and speakers, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to wrap up my presentation by summing up Seoul Olympic Games legacies. Number 1, the Games imprinted a positive image of Korea in the world. Korea successfully emerged to global stage as an economically rapidly developing country and a culturally sophisticated country as well. We shed off negative image of Korea, such as one and only divided country on this planet and ravages of Korean War. Number 2, the Games transformed socio-political topography of Korea. The Games presented Korean people with political freedom, an open and more transparent society. We tend to use the terms before and after the Olympic Games to describe changes and accomplishments we achieved in sports and politics, and economy, and society, and culture. Korea had often been known as land of morning calm, mysterious but lacking its vitality. But after the Games, however, Korea was born anew as a dynamic Korea. The 3 photos showed dynamic Korea. The left photo shows the 2002 World Cup. The hundreds of thousands Korean football fans took street to cheer Korean team up. The center photo shows the pop music singer known professionally, Psy, and performed in front of Eiffel Tower. And tens of thousands Parisian and other international tourists together to see the performance. The right-hand side, Korean-made cars are waiting for shipment. Games implanted self-confidence and pride in the Korean people, which became driving force of Korea's socioeconomic development. Can-do spirit spread in the whole society by successful hosting the Games. The Seoul Olympic Games gave developing countries, we believe, hope and dream of hosting the global sports events. Current Paralympics are another legacy of the Seoul Olympic Games. The 1988 Paralympics had been the first to be held in the same sites as the Olympics right after the Games and have maintained a solid tradition. Ladies and gentlemen, Seoul Olympics brought together East and West for the first time since large boycott of 1980 and 1984 Olympics during the Cold War time. We realized the Seoul Olympic Games' philosophy, harmony and progress, and also achieved the Games' catchword, world to the soul, soul to the world. The 1988 Games left countless invaluable legacies to Korea and Korean people, which are still alive 30 years later and will live on in 30 years from now. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oh, for your presentation and reminding us about the transformative power of the Olympic Games. Thank you very much. Our second presentation will be delivered by the former president and CEO of the Vancouver Organizing Committee for the 2010 Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games, Mr. John Furlong. Would you please welcome Mr. Furlong with a warm round of applause.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for your kind invitation to come to Seoul and participate in this important venture. It's interesting listening to people talk about legacy, and I think probably everyone in the room perhaps has a different definition of what it is, would describe it differently. But the one thing I think everyone would say is that however you describe it, whatever you have to say about it, it's important. And when I think back to the Vancouver 2010 Olympic Games, and I think about the conversation that took place in Canada about legacy, it began many years before the staging of the Games. So Vancouver staged the Olympic Winter and Paralympic Winter Games in 2010. We competed against PyeongChang, Salzburg from Austria, and 5 other countries, and we were awarded the Games. It was an incredibly tension-filled time up to the date that we were awarded the Games. And in Canada, and in all of our deliberations with the IOC, we made strong representations, not so much about how well we would try to execute the Olympics and Paralympics, but what would be left behind when everyone has gone home. What would people say about us? What would the result of those games be long into the future, long after the Olympic flame goes out? So as you heard at the very beginning today, which is very important, we began with a compelling vision. We did not see the staging of the Games as 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 weeks of staging spectacular sporting events that the whole world could watch, but rather we saw this as an exercise in nation building, as contributing to the future of the country and the region and the city and all things that make up a country like Canada. So we were talking about legacies from day one. We were talking about, what the final story would be. What would the chapter that would be written about Vancouver 20, 30 years after the Games? And had we not done this, it is quite likely we would never have been given permission to bid for the Games in the first place. Our governments would have seen this as not something that they wanted to support. So the idea was to present a case that would contribute greatly to the future of the country. To build for tomorrow and not just for today. The Vancouver 2010 Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games were referred to as Canada's Games, not Vancouver's Games, but a Games that was intended to touch every region, every part of Canada, every person, every area of the country. We promised at the very beginning that we would be economically responsible, that we would deliver an affordable, sustainable Games, that we would do it in the very best way we could, we would be creative, and we would do absolutely nothing that was not essential to the delivery of the Games. So we promised things like, we said we would construct the venues for the Olympic Games within the budget that we were assigned. We promised that we would deliver the Olympic and Paralympic Games within the operating budget that we were assigned. And had we been unable to do that, we would have been met with a very unforgiving Canadian public. It was a promise that was extremely serious. So we did our homework, and one of the legacies that we wanted to establish from the beginning and keep under the microscope to the end was to be fiscally responsible, to deliver on that key promise that often gets organizing committees into difficulty. We promised that we would engage Aboriginal Canada in the staging of the Games, that we would invite First Nations to not just be part of the Games, to be part of all of the infrastructure of the Games, but to be part of the governance. The 4 host nations of the region that we live in were all very keenly involved in the preparations and for the staging of the Games, and the chiefs of those nations were treated by the IOC and by Canada as heads of state. It was a very important step in a new direction for our country. We promised in that stage that we would grow the importance of sport in Canada. Our performance as a winter sport nation had been mediocre in the years before this, and we promised that that would change, that we would invest in sport and grow its importance, not just for Olympic and Paralympic athletes, but for all children everywhere in the country. We promised that we would grow the importance of partnerships, that the Olympic Games would not be about an organization of a few people, but an organization made up of all people, that we would invite everyone to participate in some way to stage a successful Olympic Games in 2010, to let everybody in, wherever we could find a contribution from whatever part of the country, that we would try to take advantage of that so all Canadians could feel that they made a contribution to this great Canadian story. We promised that we would build a new road to Whistler, because it was seen that the road to Whistler would be a vital piece of connecting the mountains to the city. And that promise was made for 2 reasons. One, to deliver a great Olympic Games, but to leave a lasting legacy in the future that would reduce the number of people who died on that road, would make the road more efficient, and would make the road contribute to a wonderful tourism experience that exists in that corridor of British Columbia. We promised to be socially responsible, to engage all sectors. We promised to employ from all sectors. We promised to have volunteers from all sectors and from all over the world. We promised green games. We promised to try for zero waste in the staging of the Games. We promised to seek for low emissions and to have a very small footprint. And I remember very well on the day that we all presented our credentials in Prague, that the Prime Minister of Canada flew over to Prague, and he looked at the IOC in the final stages of our presentation, and he said, "A promise made in Canada is a promise kept." It was very clear to us that this was a serious commitment that we had made to not just the IOC, but the Canadian public, that the eyes of the world were on us, and that people would expect us, if we said we would do it, then in fact that we actually would do it. So after we were awarded the Games in 2010, And after these promises were put to the test, we went back to Canada and we started the process of building these projects to try to do the responsible thing in the preparations to stage these games. So the delivery phase followed, and it lasts 7 years, as you know, and you're in it now, and it's coming very quickly to a close for you soon. So what did we do? Well, we delivered the games on time and on budget. We kept those promises under the watchful eye of the Canadian public, and we delivered those games on time and on budget through the worst financial meltdown that any of us can ever remember. That was a promise we made, and although it was extremely difficult, the expectation was there that we would do it, and so we did it. We promised that we would touch every Canadian life. So we took the Olympic flame along the longest route in its history to the front door of every home in Canada. We wanted to shine that light in the face of every child, every family, every business, down every street, all over the country. So for 45,000 kilometers, we took that flame everywhere because we wanted to make tangible the promise we made to people that everyone would be included. And so when the Olympic flame arrived in Vancouver in the stadium, that every person could see their connection to that moment, that they could see their sense of ownership over this great Olympic and Paralympic triumph that was taking place in front of their eyes. We promised to use existing venues, to build nothing that was not essential. We looked at every possible way to use old venues or to use venues in different ways so that we could have a very modest and small Olympic construction budget. You'll be surprised to know that the construction budget for Olympic venues for Vancouver was $580 million. Maybe the lowest construction budget ever. And the reason for this is because we were able to take other buildings and re-energize those buildings, renovate them so that they could be used for the Olympic Games. We delivered on that $580 million and came in, as I said earlier, under budget. So we had minimal building, and I think this was seen by the country as extremely important. We had to build athletes' villages like you do, so we wanted to have these villages make a huge contribution to the future feeling of the games. So in Vancouver, we took a piece of land in the inner waterfront, probably one of the most beautiful pieces of land in the country. It was an old industrial area, and we took it down and we built one of the most spectacular housing areas on the North American continent. And it is considered to be the most beautiful place in Vancouver to live today. We built that, again, through this economic meltdown that we were all facing. In Whistler, one of the great challenges in Whistler is there was not enough housing for employees to come and work in the mountains to deliver the typical everyday services that are required to run a ski hill. So the athletes' village in Whistler was to respond to that problem, to give the athletes a great place to live during the Olympic Games and to be there so that employees working in the mountains would have decent accommodation post-games, and it worked out exactly like we hoped. The highway today is a beautiful road to Whistler. Deaths have been reduced, traffic jams have been reduced, and it has created a wonderful experience to drive from Vancouver along those mountains out to Whistler, so that the full experience of Whistler is far better than it used to be pre-games.